I never believed in ghosts. Not truly. I'd listened to stories as a kid, those told around campfires or whispered late at night, but I always chalked them up to exaggerations or just the wild imagination of someone craving attention. That changed the summer I moved into the house on Hollow Pine Road. It was 2020. The world was chaotic, and like many others, I was seeking peace in isolation. After years of city living in Boston, I decided to move somewhere quieter, somewhere that wouldn't drive me insane. I found a listing for a weathered colonial-style home in Vermont, surrounded by thick woods, valleys, and fields that had remained untouched for decades. The price was suspiciously low, but I assumed it was because of the location. Rural, remote, I didn't mind. The house itself was something out of a historical novel: tall white shutters, creaky floorboards, and a winding staircase that seemed to groan with every step. Behind the property, there was an old wrought iron fence. Beyond it, a graveyard. I remember my first glimpse of it as I stood in the backyard. The grass was wild and unkempt, and the gravestones, some cracked, some tilted, were blanketed in ivy and moss. It was unsettling, sure, but I convinced myself it was just part of the charm. I even joked to myself, free neighbors who don't talk back. The first few nights were uneventful. I spent time cleaning, unpacking, and settling into my new quiet life. But that silence, what I had once craved, began to feel different. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, as if the house was holding its breath. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to a sound I couldn't immediately place. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent. A soft scrape, 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 like something dragging across wood. My bedroom was upstairs, and the sound was coming from just below me, the hallway. I told myself it could be a branch against the siding, or maybe a raccoon. I didn't move. But then I heard footsteps. Not hurried, not loud, but deliberate, slow. My heart was in my throat. I sat upright, ears straining. Every instinct told me not to leave the bed, not to look. But after a few minutes of silence, curiosity outweighed fear. I stepped out into the hallway with a flashlight and tiptoed downstairs. Nothing. The next morning, I noticed something odd. Near the back door, muddy prints, bare feet, human-shaped, but smaller than mine. They led from the back door, not to it. I dismissed it. Maybe I'd tracked in dirt. Maybe they were old and I hadn't noticed. I couldn't be sure. But that night, I bolted the door and windows, double-checking every lock. The dreams started soon after. Dark, cold, suffocating dreams of standing in the graveyard behind the fence. In the dream, the sky was pitch black, but the ground was glowing faintly white, as if the earth itself was lit from underneath. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, and from behind the tombstones, a figure would appear. Small, slender, pale-skinned, with hair black as ink and eyes I couldn't make out. It didn't speak, it just watched. And then it would scream. Not a normal scream, not a child's wail. It was a raw, primal screech that clawed through the fabric of reality and ripped me awake, drenched in sweat. Each morning, I'd wake up more exhausted than the last. I started sleeping with the lights on, then with music, then not at all. I lost track of days. Time felt slippery in that house. One evening, I stood by the kitchen window and looked out at the graveyard. The sun had just dipped below the trees, painting the sky in blood orange and purple. As shadows lengthened across the field, I noticed a new disturbance in the grass. A small mound of freshly turned dirt. I never buried anything, and the property hadn't had visitors. I decided to investigate before I chickened out. I grabbed a flashlight, put on boots, and went out the back door. The air was ice cold, despite the summer heat earlier that day. I crossed the yard, passed the fence, and stepped into the graveyard for the first time. Every step I took made the air thicker, heavier, like wading through syrup. My flashlight flickered and died, and I cursed. The graveyard was darker than it had any right to be. There were no streetlights out here, just the stars above, and even those felt dimmer. I reached the disturbed soil and knelt. My hands shook as I brushed aside leaves and dirt. It wasn't deep. Just a few inches down, I hit something hard. A box, old, wooden, rotted at the corners. I pulled it free and opened it. Inside was a doll. Porcelain, cracked face, one eye missing. The remaining eye was painted an unnatural shade of red. It stared up at me, expressionless. I felt a wave of nausea and dread crash over me like a tide. And then I heard it. Laughter. A child's giggle, faint and distant, echoing through the trees. I ran. I sprinted back to the house, stumbled on the steps, and slammed the door behind me. My chest heaved, and I fell to my knees. I looked down and realized I was holding the doll. I had never meant to bring it inside. For the next few days, everything unraveled. I'd hear footsteps in the attic when I was downstairs. Doors would creak open slowly, even though I had latched them. The TV would turn on to static in the middle of the night. Whispers crept into the corners of my mind, soft at first, like background noise. But they grew louder. They called me by name. One night, I woke to the feeling of someone stroking my hair. I froze, too terrified to move. A soft voice whispered, "Don't leave me." I shot up, but no one was there. The house was not empty. I knew it now. Desperate, I visited the local historical society. I didn't care if they thought I was crazy. I needed answers. An old woman named Martha finally gave me some. "The house on Hollow Pine? That was the Redgrove place, years ago," she said, eyes narrowing. "The daughter went missing. They never found her. Folks say she died in that graveyard, buried in an unmarked grave. Some say she still looks for her doll." I left. I didn't ask more. That night, I packed a bag and left the doll on the kitchen counter. I drove to a motel an hour away. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The next morning, I returned with movers to collect my things, but the doll was gone. I sold the house shortly after. Took a loss. Didn't care. Even now, years later, I still dream of that graveyard. Sometimes I wake up and swear I hear tiny feet patting down my hallway, or feel cold fingers trace my cheek. I never believed in ghosts, but I do now. And I know she's still out there, beyond the fence, waiting for someone else to find her doll.